Abigail here for another podcast episode, and in this podcast episode, we're going to be talking about fear. And just so y'all know, if you see me, keep looking over here. But yeah, so honestly, favorite things. Let's start with that. I think just like my favorite things would be like, summer's been fun, laid back, nice break from school. Also, this necklace, which I should show you. Hold on. I almost lost it, and my best friend gave it to me in that gift exchange that I think I told you all about. But I didn't lose it, so that's good. Prayer request I think would just be, as I go into this year, I just really want to have a strong faith in Christ, and I just really want my faith to grow this year. So I think just prayers that my faith will grow, I guess. Verses of the day. I was stupid and did not bring my phone, so I'm gonna have to search them up. The first one is 2 Timothy 1:7 NLT. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity. It's hard to say. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. I don't know how to pronounce timidity. I don't know why I don't know how to pronounce that. I love this verse. It's literally one of my favorites. Philippians 4:6-8. Here we go. Found it. This is NLT once again. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Which the thing about I love about this verse, first of all, it just shows how important prayer is, because when you are afraid of something, praying really does help. It doesn't always solve your problems, but it just really helps shift your mind towards towards Jesus and stuff. And when you think about when you focus on Jesus and on good things, obviously you will have thoughts that aren't always good and happy and stuff, but it is always good that when you feel afraid to remind yourself of the truths of things, because when you fear, oftentimes the devil will try to make you afraid of things that aren't even true. You might be afraid that something will happen that most likely won't happen. So typically in anxiety, it'll start just making up scenarios that you're afraid will happen. And so it's really good to remind yourself of the truths in the Bible, to just remind yourself of what God says about it and your circumstance. So I just love those verses though. The next one is one of my first ever favorite Bible verses when I was little. Oh my gosh, that's the wrong. When I was little, I used to have a massive fear of the dark, and every night I was so scared that a monster would just creep out, which doesn't even make sense. So funny, the imagination I used to have. But I would always get so scared, especially when it was storming in the dark. And so whenever I was scared of the dark, I would hide under my covers and I would take 3 deep breaths, and I would take a deep breath and say this Bible verse, which was Psalm 56:3 NLT. But when I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. Which seems like such a small, simple verse. And honestly, when I was even reading through the Psalms back when I was, I don't know how old I was probably 10 or 12 or something. But when I was reading through the Psalms, I didn't even notice my favorite Bible verse. That's how small it is. But yeah, it's a small Bible verse, but it was always so significant for me, because when I was afraid, I would just go under the covers and I would be when I'm afraid, I'll put my trust in you. And I would say it 3 times, take 3 deep breaths as I was saying it, and then I would get back up from the covers, and I would roll over and try to sleep. And it actually did help, which was so funny. But it just reminded me that even when I'm afraid, I need to focus on God and trust that He's got me. I'm going to be okay, because He's got me. And then I have a lot of verses. I'm sorry, y'all. Joshua 1:9. Nope, I forgot. There we go. This is NLT, obviously. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Then, Exodus 14:14. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. I love that so much. And then we have 2 more verses left that I'm going to share with y'all. I'm sorry, I'm going to pound y'all verses. But there are so many verses on fear and stuff. I think, don't be afraid is, one of the most common words in the Bible. I don't know how many times it said that. Well, let me search that up. How many times is don't be afraid said in the Bible? Well, Copilot thinks that it said 365 times, depending on the translation. But it might be wrong, so it's around, a lot, clearly. Isaiah 41:10 NLT states, don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. And then we have Psalm 111:10 A NLT. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So yeah, those are all the verses of the day. We had a lot, but there are so many good Bible verses out there about fear, and there's just so many good ones. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into this now. I need to be quick because it's actually almost dinner time, so my mistake. We should pray. I always get so scared. I can't do this. Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for whoever is watching this episode. Just thank you for their life, and thank you for making them who they are. And I just pray that you will bless them and you will be with them this year and bless this year for them, Lord. I just pray that as I speak words in this episode, and I just pray that you will really speak through me and really help just at least one person, Lord. I just pray one person listening to this will be really impacted, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. I just remembered another favorite thing I had, and let me try to fix this. I don't know if I probably did, but there's this Devo I've been reading called, well, there's 2 Devos I've actually, so it's like a Devo book. I've been reading Live Fearless by Sadie Robertson Huff, and if you are really afraid, I totally recommend that book. I'm not finished with it, but I'm already obsessed with it. I love it so much. It's so good. And then I've also been listening to an audiobook called Love Does by Bob Goff. And honestly, it's an audiobook, so it makes these reads so much more fun. But I love it because there's some things in there I'm like, oh my goodness, that's actually really inspiring. And I guess these would be in my favorite things area. And it has nothing to do with fear, but I feel like Bob Goff, the way he describes the things in his life, makes me just feel like he has such a fearless and adventurous life that's full of fun stuff. But he's so inspiring, and there's so many moments I just laughed out loud by the things he said. But I really recommend those books because Love Does is all about just loving others, and I feel like it has a hidden theme of fearlessness, honestly, and saying yes to God. But as I usually do, I'm just gonna read underlined parts, which I do think is, if you're interested in getting a book about emotions, I would recommend this book, and that way you can follow along. This isn't sponsored or anything. I just say this book did really help me in my times of trouble, and so I would recommend it if you want a book on emotions. But that's also why I'm going through this study, because I feel like there's a lot of people who try to neglect their emotions and need to be aware of how important it is to be vulnerable, even though it can be really hard. So yeah, after going through the season I went through, I just feel like some people might need to hear this, because if I saw this stuff, I would have been like, oh. Anyways, fear brings us strength. It is the feeling that allows us to experience risk, trust, dependency, collaboration, and ultimately wisdom, because it helps us realize our need for help. This statement may sound contrary to everything you've ever heard about fear. For many of us, fear equals weakness, or we see it as an influence that makes us act in doubt and distrust in relationship, which makes us hide our fear. In our fear of fear, we continually demand guarantees and are overly controlling in any risk we take. Which is kind of relatable, because I definitely do fear sometimes, honestly. I get so afraid of things going wrong, and I get afraid of, like, fear. Which is, like, in the moment you can't really tell that you're afraid of fear, but you kind of, like, are afraid. And then I try to, like, control the situation, and it never ends well. Because I end up just, like, doing nothing and then regretting everything. If in the face of fear, we can recognize our need for help, we find great opportunity. Fear can motivate you to reach out for help, risk your heart with your need, and trust others for assistance. If you express fear truthfully, you can gain wisdom through the experience. Unfortunately, too many of us answer fear by silencing its voice. We run from risk, eliminate trust, hide our dependency, and become fretful and controlling about collaboration. Fear offers the opportunity to trust God and others with our need for help, or it entices us to stay stuck in distrust and self-will. If we have only a deep awareness of spiritual truth, then we will not have the sense to know the difference between an animal that is wounded or one that is rabid. This naivety makes us foolish and danger to ourselves and others. Basically, it's saying, because of fear, fear can be a good thing, because, like, if you weren't afraid to jump off a cliff, you would go and jump off a cliff, and that wouldn't end well. So it's, in some ways, it's good to have, like, this discernment and wisdom. It's good to have that. So sometimes fear can give us this opportunity to take risks. Like, you may be afraid to go talk to someone and share the gospel, but you can push past that fear and take the risk and do it anyway. So it kind of gives us that opportunity. So fear itself, God says He doesn't give us a spirit of fear. He gives, like, peace, and so obviously the fear isn't from God, but having wisdom and discernment is really helpful, because you can tell, like, is it good to jump off a cliff? No, it's not. That's, like, the discernment and stuff and the wisdom. If you're afraid of things like talking to people about the gospel, that is understandable. And but the fear provides, like, an opportunity to take the risk and say yes to God, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense, but so fear's gift is wisdom. Wisdom begins its creation through fear. Here is how. Fear awakens us to danger. It is a visceral, don't know how to pronounce that, reaction to physical threat, but more important, because we are creatures of the heart, fear alerts us to emotional and spiritual danger. When we are around someone who is sarcastic or belittling, for example, our hearts beat with caution. When we are around someone who we suspect will reject us in meanness, our hearts anticipate a wound, allowing us to behave carefully. These are emotional and spiritual fear responses. By the very fact of our watchfulness, we recognize inside ourselves a personal worth. By listening to our fear, listening, not giving in, by recognizing the fear and saying, okay, I'm afraid of this, but then connecting it with the truth, like, okay, I need to have wisdom in this, I need to have discernment in this, what would God do, By listening to our fear, we recognize our value and prepare to prevent harm to ourselves and others. We are developing wisdom, a keen sense of human nature, and a deep awareness of the spiritual. This caution affords us discernment, which gives us a sense of others' intentions and recognition of our own. Fear is not to help us move from discernment to judgment, because judgment hides fear. It is a form of stopping fear without listening to it. It keeps us from hearing the meaning of our fear in the moment when we are experiencing it. I do have a big problem with judgment. Discernment that comes by listening to our fear helps us choose the wisest course of action. Fear offers us the chance to decide or discern which direction to go. I heard, what's it called? Fear acronym. So there's a few different kinds. I've seen like this fear acronyms. The first one I've seen is face everything and rise. And then there's another one that says false evidence appearing real, which is very realistic. There's forget everything and run, or face everything and rise, and you kind of have this choice. But the main thing about fear is definitely false evidence appearing real, but the other one's kind of relating how you can have this choice. You can either have this discernment and say, okay, what would Jesus do? Let's put this against the truth. Or you can be like, okay, we're just gonna be afraid and give in to fear and do exactly what it says. Because if you're gonna go share the gospel, fear is gonna want, the devil's gonna want to stop you. So you're gonna have some fear most likely, especially if you're new to it. And so this fear is gonna be like, no, you shouldn't do this. There's so many things that could go wrong. So you could be like, okay, I'm just not gonna do anything. Or you could be like, okay, God, what do you think I should do? Let's stop and pray about this. So if the competent leaders, parents, and companions have healthy fear, they will attract others because in their fear they have assessed the situation, considered the possibilities, and they are attempting to respond in wisdom. They have become dependable and trustworthy by listening to and learning from healthy fear. That is the main thing about fear, is learning from your fear. Because often I'll make mistakes because I gave into my fear and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was a horrible person. And that's related to guilt, having guilt about it. But you can often learn from your mistakes and from the fear you had in that moment. Okay, I was afraid of this and now I can reevaluate, kind of thing. I want to talk about judgment and discernment. Judgment is labeling yourself or another person as someone worth less because of their behavior or attitude, which I relate to way too much. It reflects an attitude of exclusivity and impaired fear. Judgment is a form of trying to stay safe and not be taken advantage of. That is very true, because often from experience, I'll look at other people and I'll put them in categories, trying not to be rude or anything. I'm naturally just put them in categories. Okay, this person, they act this way, they dress this way, probably shouldn't be best friends with them. I instantly categorize them in hopes of being safe, which it's good to have discernment, but I guess that's not really discernment, that's more judgment. So let's read discernment. Let's see what that is. Discernment is seeking to see clearly the attitudes and behaviors of another for the purpose of making trustworthy decisions in relationship. Discernment has a questioning attitude of healthy fear and appropriate doubt. Discernment grows out of seeking truth, not safety. Okay, that kind of makes sense. I definitely think I need to work on my judgment, because I'm really bad at judging and putting people in categories and comparing. I feel I do that all way too much. Now we move on to facing responsibility. Regardless of our fear of failure, rejection, humiliation, love, or success. Why are those all way too relatable? Okay, Regardless of our fear of failure, rejection, humiliation, love, or success, we discover that accepting responsibility for our heart's desires can be scary. Courage is about facing responsibility and telling the truth about ourselves, successes, and failures. Fear makes us face ourselves and reveals our neediness. In facing ourselves, we come to terms with how deeply limited we are and how prone we are to attack others as a way to get control over our limitations instead of letting our limitations lead us to help. However, in admitting our situations, we have the opportunity to grow beyond them. When we see limitations, we begin to see how much we need others in order to succeed in making good, true, noble, helpful choices about living. By coming to terms with fear, we can take ownership of it and begin to be more truthful in our relationships. That reminds me, in the Live Fearless Devo, Sadie Robertson Huff, she says, she's like, no, you're not winning today, fear. I'm not going to give in to you. I'm going to listen to what God says and not you. You're done. No. She basically is like, no. And just tells it to go away. And I'm like, wow, I could never do that. But I guess it would probably be smart. But yeah, anyways, that just came to my mind. If we accept and use the benefits of fear, we discover that we live fully by being responsible, and we are capable of living successfully by accepting our limitations and our need for others. Fear makes us face ourselves and reveals our neediness. Then it continues. Healthy fear leads me into relationship because it helps me recognize that I am not enough. I need others. By awakening to our need for help and asking for it, we are reaching into the hope that someone has answers and has the heart's desire to offer them. We have to have somewhere to go in our dependency and limitations, so our fear leads us to risk trusting others, which in turn can deepen our relationships by exposing who we are and where we genuinely struggle. So basically it's saying fear is kind of like how in the anger chapter, anger was could be like a warning signal. And this one, fear is kind of like a warning signal in some ways. Because when you are afraid, it's like, okay, you have two choices. You can give in, or you can meet your fear with the truth and face your fear, or you kind of have a choice. What are you going to do? Too many of us in our woundedness equate vulnerability with losing control or failure, which I can feel that. The reality is that choosing to surrender control and become exposed as someone in need creates opportunity for change, growth, and fulfillment. The threat of failure is the voice of unhealthy, impaired fear. Oh no. In its impaired state, fear says that we'll be found out as we really are, creatures of need who believe our needs won't be met, or that neediness equals rejection. In an effort to mask our neediness, we grasp for control over things we don't have the ability to control. Instead of using fear to acknowledge the danger, evaluate the situation, and ask for help, we scramble in an attempt to control circumstances. That is very relatable, because often instead of using fear as a warning signal, almost hey, let's evaluate the situation, ask for help, and let's meet it with the truth and figure out what to do. I often try to control everything, and by controlling I mean just literally freezing and doing nothing. That's often what I do. I literally just freeze. The result of this is the impairment of fear, anxiety. So yay, now we get to go into anxiety. Often when I feel anxiety, I get really worried and afraid, and there's a few things that I do to try to help. When I'm afraid or worried, there's a few things I usually do. Typically, I want to have control. And so typically when I'm afraid, I feel out of control. And so I get a piece of paper or a journal. At the top, I write what I'm worried about. That's the title, what I'm worried about or what I'm afraid of. And then I write everything that I'm worried or afraid of in like this list. Do like little bullet points, but I leave one line under each of those statements. But if I can control them, for example, if I had a math test tomorrow and I was worried about if I was going to fail it, I can't control whether or not I'm going to fail it, but I can control studying and trying hard. So under that, I'll put like a little arrow and say study. Then what you can control, like studying, go ahead and go do, well, unless you can't do it, I don't know, but that way you can kind of get your mind off of it. And if I can't control them, I'll cross them off. I can't control them, I can't do anything about them. Also, prayer doesn't always change your circumstance, but it really does help. It really does help. Prayer is top tier. So then after that, after I've evaluated and seen, okay, what I can and can't control, that's in God's hands. Go pray about it. It's in God's hands now. Surrender it. Another thing I do besides prayer and that little marking off what I can't control thing is my assistant said that instead of thinking, what if, think, Father, even if. So I typically take a piece of paper and I write all my what ifs, what if this will happen, what if this will happen. And then after I've written all my what ifs, I think, Father, even if this happens, blah, blah, blah. So like last year I was really worried about something because, I went through a hard experience last year and I was like, Father, even if this horrible thing happens, you will provide money for us, you're still going to sustain us, I know you'll be with us, and I know you have a good plan, and so you're going to deliver us. And I was like, Father, even if this happens, and it helped me focus on, rather than what was happening in the moment, the hope of what was going to come out of it. Because sometimes in our hard situations, we can only focus on all of the horrible things that are going on. Sorry, my hair is wet. We can focus on all the horrible things that are going on instead of focusing on because hard times God will use, because our horrible situations God will sometimes use for his glory. So reminding yourself of how God will help you and how he has a plan is just so helpful, because it helps you look at the other side, because in Psalm 23 verse 4, it's like, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I've always loved Psalm 23, but after last year, there's one thing in that verse that stuck out to me. The word through. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Through. That means there's an end. Imagine a tunnel, You have a tunnel. If it was going on and on forever, you would never get through it. You'd just keep going in it. But if you have a tunnel, just imagine this cave, okay? You went in it, but there's a way out. There's this light on the other side. You're gonna get through it, Also, there's this song called Flowers by Samantha Ebert or something. Once again, don't know how to pronounce it, but it's called Flowers, and one of the lines says, and someday you'll see that flowers grow in the valley, which I like that because it's saying that good things happen because of your bad times, because if you go through a hard experience, you can end up using that for your testimony and sharing faith. God uses your hard times for his glory, and it may not seem like it, but he does. But anyways, those are some of the things I do. It's the the seeing what you can't control and what you can control, kind of like for instance studying, and because you can't control what grade you get, but you can control studying, what I'm saying. Or I had a science fair thing, and it's a science fair thing, and I was I don't know if I'm gonna do good, and I'm scared. But what I could do is, because I didn't really know what to expect, was part of my worry, and so I was okay, because I had this little sheet that said some things I might need to know that the judges might ask me, and so I wrote out the answers to all of those things, even though it would take a while. just to make myself feel a little bit better. And after that, I was like, okay, I feel a little bit more prepared. You know what I'm saying? So marking off what you can not control, saying what you can control. Prayer, reminding yourself of the truth is super helpful. Like, if you're afraid of something and you're like, would just kind of like aligning it with the things that the Bible says, and the Father even if instead of what if, like taking your what ifs and reminding it of the truth, like, Father, even if these horrible what ifs happen, you've got me, I'm gonna be okay, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, let's go into anxiety now, and we still have a lot left. I'm sorry, this might be a longer video. In anxiety, we rob ourselves of daily living and its experience. Instead, we try to control our future in order to prevent the reoccurrence of painful past experiences. Yeah, that's very relatable. Let me read that again. Instead, we try to control our future in order to prevent the reoccurrence of painful past experiences. Anxiety as a solution to fear is self-sufficiency. How is this opposite of God's? What? What? I can't read that. Okay. Anxiety as a solution to fear is self-sufficiency. What the heck does that mean? I'm gonna search that up. Define self-sufficiency. The quality or condition of being self-sufficient. Wow, that was so insanely helpful, bruh. No. Self-sufficient. Needing no outside help in satisfying one's basic needs, especially with regard to the protection of food. What? Okay, don't read that. Basically, self-sufficiency is something to do with needing no help, I think. Anxiety as a solution to fear is self-sufficiency, the refusal to need openly. It said it right there. Wow, okay. And to face how we are made, we would rather be miserable or make others around us miserable than expose our feelings. That is actually so relatable, because I've often seen some people afraid, and because they're afraid, or even they're like, they don't realize they're afraid, right? They're afraid of something, or they feel a certain way about something, and as a result, they say stuff. I'm like, that did not make any of us feel good. Like, why did you say that? Because they're just like afraid. They would rather enlist others to quail on anxiety than face their own heart's fears and We would rather enlist others to quail our anxiety than face our own heart's fears and our need for help. The self-sufficiency we use to stop fear produces more anxiety, because in order to control anxiety, we focus on preventing rejection, humiliation, failure, not being acknowledged for our achievements, not performing for someone else's standard, not being loved, and all the things in our future we cannot touch. The solution of control over anxiety will inevitably increase anxiety, because we cannot ever acquire enough control. So it's basically the cycle. When you're anxious, you try to control the situation. You try to control everything. You try not to need help. You try this, and then you end up getting more anxious. And then you try to control it, and you need no one's help, and then you get more anxious. It's this endless cycle of anxiety. And I know some people who are deeply afraid and have anxiety, and don't say that. I think if you're afraid or have deep anxiety, because I know a lot of people who do, trying those things help, but ultimately get in the Word, prayer, remind yourself of biblical truths, because I used to be so afraid of things, and insecure of things, because sometimes I feel like my anxiety would make me feel insecure, so whenever I was afraid of things, though, I would just have to, I would put sticky notes up of like reminders, of like Bible verses that about fear, or like things like about fear, like, and in reality, we really don't need to be afraid, but never mind, don't say that actually. Alright, so now, anxiety misinforms us. It says for us to control when we need to let go. That is really good. Let me read that again. Anxiety misinforms us, which makes me think of that fear in an acronym, which was, I've already forgotten it. False evidence appearing real. I feel like that really relates to anxiety. False evidence appearing real. So, anxiety misinforms us. It says for us to control when really we need to let go. Yeah. Anxiety commands that you make yourself invulnerable. Fear requests that you expose vulnerability and neediness to gain healthy control, the appropriate care of your own welfare. Back to the whole fear, do not fear thing. Fear, the emotion fear, you're allowed to have emotions. Anxiety ultimately is not that good. And fear isn't really that good either, because it can lead to anxiety. But if you choose to have this discernment and wisdom and remind yourself of the truths of what God says and face your fears, then you won't really meet the anxiety part of it. So I feel like that's when it can be good. Fear can be this like signal like, hey, you have a choice. You can either go into anxiety and freeze in fear and give in to fear, or you can, what would Jesus do? You know what I'm saying? You can face your fears. Which your fears don't even have to, like, if you're afraid of spiders, you can't exactly face your spiders, but like, I feel like y'all understand, right? I hope so. Oh, that's such a bad shot of me. Okay. Now we move into vulnerability. Any child will ask for help to go into the dark. We need to listen to this expression of need. Through his clear expression of vulnerability, a child can find comfort in the dark because of the hand that holds his tightly. The child who is forced to deny his heart his true need for help exposed by fear is left to run wildly through the dark, developing rituals to escape the fear of it or manufacture a multitude of excuses to avoid it. That's actually so relatable, because when I get scared of something, I try to make all these excuses to avoid it or just try to escape it. And it really does help when you have someone to help you alongside you, especially when it's a parent, but really anyone. Darkness isn't what the child fears so much. He fears being in the darkness alone. Vulnerability to need, once it has been rejected, becomes the object of fear. But in place of facing our fear through relationship, we grow anxious for control over our fears. Darkness then becomes the problem, when originally not having vulnerability honored was the real problem. Sometimes because of our anxiety, we live in defensiveness against events that may or may not occur. We throw ourselves into the future and end up missing the present. We end up borrowing trouble. Tragically, this solution often manufactures the very things we dread. Whoa, hold on. Let's just say this. This short story of rejection of the heart becomes a long saga of survival. For too many of us, anxiety is an indication that we are trying to get away from having to deal with the fear in our hearts by dreading something that has not happened or trying to prevent the reoccurrence of something that has happened. For example, we live in defensiveness against events that may or may not occur. We throw ourselves into the future and end up missing the present. We end up borrowing trouble. Tragically, this solution often manufactures the very things we dread. For instance, if we dread being rejected and stay away from intimacy, we wind up alone and rejected. Our solutions for control become problems when we deeply and simply need to admit the truth. We are afraid. And now we move into rage, which is way too relatable for me. Another impaired expression of fear is rage. So we have anxiety, now we have rage. Rage. It results from refusing to face our fear of vulnerability. Oh wait, let me read this little quick thing. Control and fear. Control is trusting what we can see with our eyes, produce with our hands, or cause to happen through our planning and manipulation. Faith is the substance of things we hoped for. Faith is trusting what we cannot see with our eyes. Through listening to hope in spite of doubts, we dare to believe that there's a way beyond our greatest obstacles. Faith gives substance to our hope and ultimately leads to healing. But yeah, anyways, back to rage. Rage lashes out silently or loudly to harm whatever is in its path, as numerous children, spouses, co-workers, and other innocents have tragically experienced. Rage almost always lashes out from a deep emotional and spiritual wounds. Rage-filled people are terrified of exposing their hearts. Rage then is a defense used against the heart to deny and hide our terror. Ooh, we're gonna get into rage versus anger. That's exciting. Oh, wow. Rage destroys the benefit of fear because it denies the fact that fear even exists. Fear awakens us to potential emotional and spiritual harm. Rage tries to control the possibility of harm by rejecting fear and what the fear is telling us. Rage rejects our pain. Now we're going to go into rage versus anger. Many of us mistakenly confuse rage and anger. Yes, I did that too. We've been taught that anger and rage are the same thing. We've associated anger as harmful, destructive force, when actually the harmful, destructive force occurs as a refusal to experience the fear of our hearts. That is the most relatable thing in the universe, because when I was little, I always thought anger was just so bad because I experienced it so much. But when in reality, it wasn't actually anger I was experiencing. It was this rage from denying that I was afraid, because, I was so little and I didn't really know how to do that. Didn't really know how to acknowledge that I was afraid, and so I'd get angry and try to get the attention I needed, and it didn't end well. In truth, rage and anger are miles apart. Rage rejects the fear of having desire. Anger is an acknowledgement of the depth of our desire. Rage denies our humanity with a willful fury against vulnerability. Anger acknowledges our humanity with all it hungers. Fear has Rage is a state of refusal. Anger is a state of openness and vulnerability. By mistaking rage for anger, we end up thinking that someone else's anger is a rejection of us. Yep. Because we have experienced people raging at us. Many of us have anxiety about anyone expressing anger toward us. When they raged at us, they were indeed rejecting us because they were harming us. Interesting. To move from anxiety and rage back to healthy fear, we need to accept that we will experience hurt. This hurt, though, does not have to stop us from living out the heart's desires in an open fashion. Even with hurt and the fear of hurt, we can, through courage and healing, continue to trust and believe that relationship is possible. Many of us as survivors must also work through the past, because hurt and the fear of heart pain have occurred so many times before that we believe more will just simply kill us. Okay, that made no sense. Let me reread that. Many of us as survivors must also work through the past because hurt and the fear of heart pain have occurred so many times before that we believe more will just simply kill us. It is good to work through our fear because full life awaits us, and the voice of the heart commands that we live fully as emotional and spiritual creatures. The first step is to admit that pain in our hearts exists, as well as the fear of exposing it. Healthy fear allows us to take the risk. Anxiety keeps us from taking any risk at all. That is very relatable because I get so scared that the anxiety creeps in and it's like, no, don't take the risk, don't do it. And it's so bad, and I end up regretting like everything. Because I remember, I think one of the biggest things from last school year that I regretted was being afraid. And when I say being afraid, it was really the anxiety of not taking the risks. So last year, like, my biggest regret was not taking risks, which is kind of sad. Okay. Fear tells us to go to our hearts and evaluate the experience. Anxiety demands that we look outside ourselves for answers when we need to look inside our hearts. We need to ask ourselves, what do I fear? What am I afraid is going to happen? By acknowledging fear, we will eventually move away from anxiety and toward a deeper serenity found only in listening to the voice of the heart. The great benefit of fear is that it offers us a chance to face our human circumstance and tell the truth about them. We are vulnerable and in need. We grow okay. Without fear, there is no wisdom because Without fear, there is no wisdom because we're not stopping to assess the circumstance. Respect the challenges, reach out for help, prepare for the results, and then march into them. That is good. I'm going to reread that. Without fear, there is no wisdom because we're not stopping to assess the circumstances, respect the challenges, reach out for help, prepare for the results, and then march into them. Face your fears. Face your fears. I think a lot of people mistake fear for anxiety. They're like, fear is horrible. And yeah, the devil often uses fear to make us anxious and have this horrible anxiety or rage. And I honestly get so anxious all the time. I will literally be like, I want to tell this person that their shirt looks cute, and I'll just get so scared. And it sounds so stupid. I'll be like, their shirt looks cute, I should go tell them. But then it's like, what if they don't hear me? Because for some reason, somehow I can't really hear how loud I speak. And so it's like, what if they don't hear me? What if they're like, okay, cool? And then it's like, just what if it's awkward? It's like, literally, there's nothing that's gonna go wrong. Like, go talk to them. It's just like, I feel like it's stupid, but it's really, it's always normal to fear. Fear is a normal thing. And often the devil tries to use this fear and make us so anxious and like under this cloud of dread and stuff. God wants us to take this fear and go, hey, we're not going to give in to the fear. We're not going to be anxious. We're going to pray, meet it with the truth. We're going to face our fears, even if it's scary. Talk to God about it, because that seriously does help. Sometimes I'll be like so scared of something and I'm like, God, I really don't know what to do. And he'll be like for instance, I was scared of making this podcast. I was like, God, I don't have the right camera. I didn't even really have a mic at that time. I only had like one of those little clip-ons that didn't really work. I was like, I don't really have a good quality mic, and this one's not even the best quality, honestly. It's, I was like, I don't really have a good quality mic. I don't know what I'm talking about. I've got no experience. I don't think anyone's gonna listen to me. I don't think anyone's gonna care. And God was like, look, you don't need the best quality camera to start. You don't even need a camera. You can just use I literally am using my iPad right now. I was like, I need this amazing setup and this awesome name. He's like, look, you don't need a nice setup. Find a place to sit. You don't need a good mic. Just make sure they hear you. And he was like, just start. Just do it. Face the fear. And here I am today. So, facing your fears is a good idea. The gain of fear. The more we gain wisdom, the more we are certain that healthy fear will lead us to beneficial circumstances. Healthy fear allows us to trust the authority, words, deeds, and hearts of Healthy fear allows us to trust the authority of others and God. Healthy fear puts us in the position of greater influence and greater leadership. Healthy fear, and that's actually true, because the more you push past your fear and face them, you gain more confidence, and your leadership skills can often grow really really well. Healthy fear makes us wise because we can listen to the experience of life and preserve ourselves for good things. Healthy fear can allow us to accept serenity that comes only through God. Healthy fear gives us many benefits. Okay, healthy fear gives us many benefits. I'm losing my mind. Okay. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. The recognition of our deep limitations that comes from admitted fear is the awakening of our need for God and others. This is not a mental acknowledgement, it is a heartfelt neediness. As we discover our neediness, we find a God who is always in charge, in love, and on duty. As our neediness is turned into dependence, the dependence is turned into hope for good and trust that goodness is coming. As we allow ourselves to discover goodness, we also discover faith. The certainty eradicates anxiety. Fear, used well, is the antidote to worry. Isn't that astounding? Now in this knowledge of fear, go hug your children, kiss your father, tell your mother of your hurts, tell God you need more. Tell God you need help. Tell your spouse you were wrong. Admit to yourself your lack of sufficiency, your inability to control your circumstances, and your hunger for love. Release your anxieties, embrace your fears, and pursue wisdom. Grow into faith, reach out for help, give it away. So to wrap this all up, I think a big thing when it comes to fear is a lot of us get into this anxiety trap or this like rage when we fear. So first of all, when I'm gonna just kind of share some of my experiences when I'm afraid. Like there's this one time, I think I mentioned it last time, I had this like school project and I was so scared of failing it that I like locked myself in my bathroom and I was just like so angry. And I wasn't even angry, I was just so afraid. I was so afraid I tried to like hurt myself. I was yelling and screaming and it was not pretty, but I ended up afterwards, my parents were like, look, because this was after my parents read this book, so they're like, we've learned some stuff now. They're like, look, you're afraid, we need to go talk about this. I was really angry. I'm not angry. I did not want to talk to them. I was like, no, leave me alone. When in reality, I needed someone to talk to, and I did not need to be alone. I needed help. And so then I went on a walk with my dad, and we talked about what I was afraid of, and he was like, let's just practice it a little bit. That's what you can control, right? Let's just practice for this school project thing. And then in the morning I practiced again, and then I felt better. And it was like, acknowledging your fear and having someone to talk to is like literally so important. And when it comes to anxiety, I feel that a lot, honestly, a lot more than I really should. It can be as simple as going to talk to someone. I'm like, what if? Well, like, and then one of my friends, she said, that her dad says, or she said, she told me, like, is it gonna matter in 30 days? Is it gonna matter? And she says, is it gonna matter in a week? Is it gonna matter in 30 days? Is it gonna matter in a month? Is it gonna matter in a year? Is it gonna matter in a lifetime? Is it gonna matter in heaven? I did the last part. Because, like, in reality, going to talk to someone, they're gonna forget it in a week. Telling someone that you love them, if they're not meant for you in a lifetime, that's really not gonna matter. If they say they don't like you back, like, in a lifetime, it's really not gonna matter. Because first of all, if they're not meant for you, you're gonna get someone better. You are. So honestly, go face your fears, The biggest thing is definitely having someone you can acknowledge the truth with that's not going to judge you. If you have someone that you would like to tell how you feel to, like if you want to be vulnerable to someone but you don't always trust them, maybe have them read this book. I don't know, like if it's an adult because I feel like after my parents read this, they were like, okay, because they were able to recognize how I was feeling a lot more, even when I wasn't. So I think if you're parents, who I really do think some parents can be really helpful to talk to, not in everyone's circumstance, but in some people's. So if you like want to tell someone like your parents or a friend or whatever how you feel, but you're like, I don't really know if I can trust you that much, maybe have them read this book, and maybe I'll do like a study over it or something. or maybe like tell them like, look, I don't want you to judge me. This is how I feel. This is how I really openly feel, and I don't want you to blah 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 blah. Also, keeping a journal can be helpful, but if you're not like allowed to keep a journal or something, or like if you're worried someone will find it, like maybe tell someone like, hey, I have this journal. Like if you know they're gonna find it, be like, hey, look, I have this journal. I do not want you reading this. This is my personal information, and this is like everything in my mind and soul, and this is my personal stuff that you shouldn't read. So kind of set the boundaries there, because if they know not to touch it, hopefully they'll respect that. Anyways, I think when it comes to fear kind of gives us two options. You can either give into it and let the anxiety overtake you, or you can acknowledge how you feel, ask someone for help. Like if you're afraid to talk to someone, sometimes I'll be like, I'm kind of scared to talk to this person, and I'll be like, oh bro, what, why are you afraid, go do it. And they'll kind of like give me a boost of confidence. Almost sometimes they'll be like, I can come with you, you know. So tell someone and then just go do it. Or, well, I mean, if it's not smart to do, then maybe ask God and pray to him. Be like, should I do this? Is this smart? And maybe do some of those tips, like the Father, even if instead of what if, the seeing what you can control, reminding yourself of biblical truths in prayer. Prayer doesn't always solve your circumstances, but it does help. Really does help. Now we're going to move into the personal reflection questions. The first one, what are the benefits of feeling fear? How has fear helped you? Second, what about trusting another person scares you? Third, when are some times that you have been reactive, impulsive, or indecisive? What did you fear at those times? Fourth, when annoyances or worries strike, how do you deal with them? Do you ever try to force control into those situations? How do you go about it? 5. In what ways has fear helped you value yourself with good decisions? So that's the end of this video, and this video is quite long, honestly. Next week's is on shame. But yeah, I hope that episode at least spoke to one person. If y'all have any prayer requests, any favorite things, any favorite Bible verses, because I don't think anyone said that last week, so I thought it would be fun if y'all told me some of yours. Yeah, like, let me know. Yeah, just y'all have a great week. Next week's episode is on shame. I think I already said that. Yep, I did. But yeah, I hope that video helped. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to ask me. Because sometimes I'll say something wrong, and y'all are probably like, "What did you just say?" So feel free to ask me. But yeah, that's the end of this episode. I'll see y'all next week. Bye.